Hey vinyl community, today I'm going to be ranking the studio albums of Genesis. I seem to be on a real Genesis kick lately. I'm not sure exactly why, but basically for Genesis you have the progressive rock era with Peter Gabriel and a few albums beyond that. And then you have the Phil Collins era, which really began with the album, and then there were three continuing on until the album We Can't Dance. And most people seem to be either in one camp or the other. There are some fans who appreciate both eras of Genesis, but I'm going to be blending them all together. I am one of those few fans who actually enjoy the Peter Gabriel era, but I also like the Phil Collins era. So I am going to give you my rankings. Again, these are my own personal opinions. You may disagree, but just know that this is my own personal preference. This is the order in which I prefer to listen to my Genesis album. So let's get started. Now, number 15, I am going to go with 1997's Calling All Stations. Not really much to recommend about this album. It is not really a Genesis album. You only have two original members, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford. And they have Scottish singer Ray Wilson, who was the lead singer that they brought in. It was never going to be really a Genesis album. It's not terrible, but it's not Genesis. I'm sorry, you can't replace Phil Collins like you could Peter Gabriel. So that one I'm just dismissing right off the bat. Number 14, I am going to go with their first album, From Genesis to Revelation. This is very much in an art rock vein. It is not up to the standards of some of the more recognized albums of the Peter Gabriel era, their classic early 70s period, but it's interesting for a listen, but it's really got more elements of kind of hippie art rock than anything else, and not even going to really go into this album that much. Just know it's not very good. Number 13, We Can't Dance from 1991. This was the final studio album with the trio Collins, Banks, and Rutherford. And it does have its moments, to be sure. The big singles off of here were No Son of Mine, Jesus He Knows Me, and I Can't Dance. I'm not a big fan of the track I Can't Dance. It's just a little too poppy, a little too cheeky for me. There are some other, Hold On My Heart is your typical Genesis ballad. There's some okay tracks on here, but they really were at the end of a hot streak here. It's all right, but for me, just not enough memorable tracks on here. I really enjoy the last couple of albums that they released before this, much better than this one. It's their final studio album with Phil Collins. It likely will be their last studio album with Phil Collins. I don't think there's going to be another Genesis studio album. So anyway, that is why I don't care for it not that I don't care for it that much. It's just not a favorite for me. Number 12, Trespass. So moved a little bit away from the art rock, hippie rock, shades of psychedelic rock, which was From Genesis to Revelation. Trespass is pretty good. Looking for Someone is a great opening track. I think Visions of Angels is fine. I like The Knife a lot, but it's okay. It's definitely a transitional album. They were still trying to find their sound. Hadn't successfully put together that formula yet, but this one is still worth checking out, particularly if you like the early 70s Peter Gabriel albums. Number 11, I am going to go with, believe it or not, Invisible Touch, and I can't believe I'm ranking this album so low because I do like it a lot. There are a lot of really great tracks on here. Invisible Touch was the first single off this album. It's very much a Phil Collins poppy type of song. Doesn't really sound too much like what Genesis had done before. I mean, it's closer to the previous album, but it's still very much top 40 Genesis. Tonight, Tonight, Tonight was a great track. It's an extended track. I'm not going to call it a progressive rock track because it's not, but they just carry out this theme for longer than any other track on the album. But it's enjoyable. They trimmed it down to, I don't know, it was about maybe 3 or 4 minutes for radio consumption. Land of Confusion was great. It's got the video with the puppets. In Too Deep is another Phil Collins ballad. Anything She Does is a total Phil Collins song. I have no idea how that made it onto this album, but that really sounds more at home on a Phil Collins album, but I'll take it. It's fine. I like it. And then I really like the Domino suite here, part 1 and the Glow of the Night, and part 2, The Last Domino. Again, it's not progressive rock. It's kind of like the Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea from the self-titled Genesis album, but it's enjoyable. Throwing It All Away, another Phil Collins ballad. Phil Collins was kind of like the Peter Cetera, really, when you think about it, of Genesis, but not necessarily a bad thing, but he liked his ballads, and damn it, he was going to put at least 2 of them on every album. And then you got the Brazilian, which is an interesting instrumental. I really like it a lot. It's a cool way to close out the album. I think it's melodic. I enjoy it, and great. So I'm ranking this low, but not because I don't like it. I really like this album a lot, but I got to stick it somewhere, and I just cannot stick it above the rest of the albums on this list. Number 10, Nursery CRYME. Finally, they got it together. They figured out this is what we are going to be. You've got the classic quintet here of Peter Banks, Tony Rutherford, Mike Hackett, Peter Gabriel, and Phil Collins. And damn, what a good album they put together here. The musical box is great. I love the Return of the Giant Hogweed. I think it's a really cool track. I love the guitar arpeggios at the beginning that Steve Hackett is playing. Harold the Barreled is fun. Harlequin is cool. And, you know, the Fountains of Salmac is also very enjoyable. But this is finally the first fully realized Genesis album where they're like, this is who we are. And this is what we were meant to do, and it's a really fantastic album. Number 9, and then there were 3 after Steve Hackett left to pursue a solo album. Oh, you're not good enough for us. Well, you can leave, Steve Hackett, is what the others, I presume, said to him. But anyway, it's a good album. It really follows the formula of the 2 albums before this, Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering, and it's enjoyable. It's, you know, they really didn't lose a step. I hate to say it, Steve Hackett, but I think Mike Rutherford filled in very admirably in Steve Hackett's absence. Down and Out is a great track. Undertow Ballad of Big is great. I love Burning Rope. Scenes from a Night Dream. This is still a progressive rock album, and a damn good one. Absolutely at that. And then you had the radio hit Follow You, Follow Me, but I love this album. I think it's great. I don't think there's a weak track on here, and it just shows the resiliency of Genesis, that you could discard their singer-songwriter, Peter Gabriel. We can discard our amazing lead guitarist, and, you know, we're going to still keep plowing ahead and putting out great albums. Number 8, their self-titled album, Genesis. This was the first Genesis album that I ever owned on my own. I had it on cassette, and I love it. The videos were all over MTV. You got Mama, which is a great, sinister lead-off track. I love Phil Collins. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, it sounds almost like Darth Sidious or something, but I love it. You know, that's like, damn, you know, he can out Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins can on this album, and he did. But just, you know, it's so much fun, that first track, and just the moody synthesizers and everything. And what a way to lead off the album, like after ABAGAB, which is like, you know, kind of like a punchy pop album, and then you start off with Mama, and you're like, whoa, how cool is that? There was even a video for that. That's All then definitely shifts into a lighter mood. Home by the Sea, Second Home by the Sea, I love that track back in the day. I still love it. I think it's pretty cool. It's not progressive rock, but damn it, I don't care. Whatever you want to call it, it is very great. Illegal Alien, ooh, can't say that anymore. But that also had a video, and that was a strong single. Taking It All Too Hard, you know, the Phil Collins ballad, the second one. of note on here. Just a Job to Do, which is a gritty synth type rocker. I almost call it synth pop a little bit. Silver Rainbow, totally overlooked on this album, but what a great track. Love that on here. And then I love It's Gonna Get Better. You got the beginning backwards kind of guitar, whatever that is, that leads you in. And then they pick up the beat. It's just a great track. This album is awesome. Awesome. Just not as awesome as some of the other ones on this track, on this list, but not to be ignored. Great, great album. Okay. Number 7, 1980. We're going to go with Duke. I always love the cover on this. What a cool cartoon cover this is. And this is pretty much the last you were going to see any true progressive rock on a Genesis album. You got Behind the Lines, which is great. Duchess, guide vocal, which is, let's call it what it is. It's the guide vocal for the melody, the music that we put together. Misunderstanding was definitely the radio hit, probably the best known track off this album. Turn It On Again, I love, although I like it better on 3 Sides Live. It's a little more powerful, but what a great, great track. I like the Duke's Travels and Duke's End. It's like, farewell, progressive, nice knowing ya, we're moving on, but it's cool. I like it. All right, number 6, Wind and Wuthering. Love this one too. This followed A Trick of the Tail, which was their second album without Peter Gabriel at the helm. But still, as a quartet, this is a solid, solid album. 11th Earl of Mars, a great track. One for the Vine is very cool. Your Own Special Way was kind of that first Phil Collins ballad that you would see on an album. What Gorilla is fun. I love Blood on the Rooftops. I love that Mellotron melody on here. It is very cool. Maybe my favorite track on here. And then Afterglow, what a great way to close out the album. And it's just a huge, melodic, iconic track. I always thought that was underrated, but you know, nonetheless, I love this album a lot. It is a great progressive rock album. And you know, I've never thought they missed Peter Gabriel all that much, to be honest with you. Number 5, and this was the very first Genesis album I was ever exposed to when my dad bought this album, ABAGAB. Love ABAGAB, and this is definitely, okay, we are definitely going all in on the pop rock, but they do it so well. ABAGAB is a great track. No Reply at All is a fun. It's got a lot of horns, which horns on a Genesis album, blasphemy, but nonetheless, it's still really fun. You could say that this track also would have been better suited on a Phil Collins album, but I don't care. I think it is great. I love Phil Collins as a vocalist, as a drummer, as a philanthropist, as a human being, as a visionary, as an ambassador for the human race. I know it's all hyperbole, but anyway, you know, you got Me and Sarah Jane. Love Me and Sarah Jane is a fantastic track. It is my favorite track on this album, by the way. Keep It Dark is very cool. Dodo/Lurker is fun. It's got some elements of what went before, but it's just presented in more of a commercial type of way. Whodunit? Should have been a B-side. Maybe should have never even been recorded at all. I'm not a fan of that one. But Man on the Corner is great. Like It or Not is fantastic. And I love Another Record. Genesis has some of the best album closers in the history of rock and roll. And maybe it's just because I'm in a Genesis mood that I'm saying that. But I'm telling you, Another Record, damn it, is a great album closer. I love it. Just love everything about this album except for Whodunit. And yeah, it's great. Number 4, A Trick of the Tail. So Peter Gabriel was gone. What was Genesis gonna do? Were they just gonna fold their tents in and leave? There's possibly no way you could replace somebody so charismatic and brilliant and such a personality in your band. Could you? Well, Pink Floyd went on without Syd Barrett, and Genesis moved on from Peter Gabriel very convincingly, although definitely, you know, Phil Collins is trying to sound a little bit like Peter Gabriel here, but that's okay. Dance on a Volcano is fantastic. Entangled. Squonk is great. Squonk is kind of like that first classic, like, okay, this is Genesis in the new era. It's the, you know, the Phil Collins, the songwriting of Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, some Steve Hackett in there. But definitely this was a sound of Genesis to come. Robbery, Assault and Battery is amusing. A Trick of the Tail, love that one too. Just, it's got kind of like a bouncy melody. I love just the theme of it all. I think it works well. And Los Endos, again, another great album closer. So love this one, and it is fantastic. My number 3 pick, I am going to go with Foxtrot. This is absolutely one of the best progressive rock albums of all time. Why is it ranked so low? Because Genesis is one of the best progressive bands of all time, and this to me was their 3rd best progressive rock album. But you got Watcher of the Skies, which is fantastic. Timetable is great. Get 'Em Out by Friday. Each one of these is a mini story, and they're told in such an interesting and, in many cases, amusing way. Peter Gabriel has a great sense of humor, obviously, but you're just captivated through the entire song because lyrically and musically, it is so interesting. Supper's Ready. I mean, one of the best progressive rock tracks of all time, no question. It is a 23-minute opus, and it is Genesis at their very best. Worth checking out this album just for that track alone, but it is phenomenal. But there are still 2 more. What could they be? Number 2, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Now, you might be a little surprised that I'm not ranking this number 1. Why am I not ranking it number 1? Well, for starters, its length. It is a double album, and really it gets a little long at the end, and it feels a little bloated. There's some great stuff on here to be sure, but there's also some stuff which I think is filler. But you've got The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, right into Fly on the Windshield. Then Cuckoo Cocoon is great, In the Cage. The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging is almost like a military march. Back in NYC is fantastic. Carpet Crawlers is great. I love Anyway, I think is fantastic. But the longer the album goes on, the longer it just feels like, when is this going to be over? Like, enough. I mean, it's got some good music for sure, but it's just a sprawling album. Still great, though. The best moments on here are some of the best in Genesis's entire catalog. But still, my favorite is number 1, Selling England by the Pound. What a great album. It's everything that I love about Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but in a more condensed form. You got Dancing with the Moonlit Night, which is just a great album opener. What a nice, it's 8 minutes long, but it's such a cool album opener. I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe is almost like Arnold Layne if you're a Pink Floyd fan, kind of like that. Bertha Fifth, oh my God, with that piano opener, Tony Banks really shines on this track, as does Steve Hackett. He plays a great counterpoint to the piano melody, the keyboard melody on here. I just love that middle section where you got that synthesizer, the piano into the synthesizer, into Steve Hackett, and just his brilliant guitar tones are so melodic. That track is fantastic. Battle of Epping Forest is a lot of fun. A great, iconic track. Cinema Show, I love too. That is very melodic. There's just so much great songwriting on this album, and I don't know why I like it more than Foxtrot, other than, you know, I feel they were progressing with every album. Each album was getting a little better. Isle of Plenty is a brief little coda at the end. That's cool, but this is definitely worth checking out. If you're a Genesis fan and you haven't picked this one up yet, do yourself a favor. It is brilliant. It is my favorite. And that, all kidding aside, no more funny business. That is my Genesis ranking. Thanks for watching as always, and take care.